Hey guys, what's up? Sandu here. So today I'll be talking about this beautiful, cute gray box that you can see right here. That is feature packed with a lot of stuff actually. So it's a DAC first, it's a preamp, it's a headphone amp combo, and of course a Bluetooth receiver. So definitely a lot of stuff inside. It's called Loxjie D30, and I have already reviewed its predecessor D20 some time ago. But please don't watch that video because it was some of my first videos, so I wasn't that confident. Anyways, D30 will cost you 159 bucks or 159 euros here in Europe, so definitely a very affordable unit. But the biggest questions, will it suck or would it rock? Well, I'll try to answer that question in this review, so stay tuned for that. Thankfully, we are not getting the same blue or red colors that Loxjie used in the former D20 DAC and in a lot of other stuff. D30 is finished in matte gray and has a dimmable screen, so all my fears are now dust in the air. The device itself is a lot more pleasing to the eyes, as it is beautiful machined from a single block of aluminum with just a single plate attached under the unit. It has smooth lines and corners, so you won't cut yourself with this one. It has a humanized look and a pleasing shape. It is more or less the same size with an Apple Mac Mini, which I always believed that are looking really cute and really well made. Not going to lie that this is the prettiest device made by Loxjie by a very long shot. It is actually pleasing to the eyes, so that's a big plus. But did you see their pyramidal shaped red colored amplifiers? Hopefully you didn't. Anyways, Loxjie steered into the right direction with this one, and there isn't much to complain about. All its screws were hidden under the unit and a few on its back, so all in all it looks clean, minimalist and quite modern. As for controls, D30 has a very simple and straightforward front panel with just an LCD screen on the left and a 1/4 inch headphone jack and a volume knob on the right. They increased the size of the LCD quite a lot compared to its predecessor, so it is about 3 times bigger now and has a decent resolution too. Lettering is big, I can see easily them from afar in the living room. It might have a small body, but it looks quite interesting once you take a glance on its back, so you can spot 3 digital inputs as USB, coaxial and optical. There is a Bluetooth antenna socket as well, an AC inlet and a power switch on the right, and on the left there is your fixed or not single-ended RCA output. As for the technology inside this unit, we are talking about the newest generation of IEM silicon. They used a mid-range chipset, more exactly the AK4493, that I have already experienced in 7 other digital sources. The USB receiver is the famous XMOS XU208 that proved to be stable long-term. It is killing a lot of source noise from your PC or smart device, and you can find it in the best DACs of today. Loxjie went with an ultra-low noise power supply. I'm pretty sure that I've seen this exact one in a few devices made by SMSL Audio. There are quite a few bigger and smaller Nikon electrolytic caps for power filtering and storing. They will not store a huge power capacitance, so don't expect the nicest punch and impact with headphones or speakers. The DAC output stage uses a single, very linear sounding LM4562 dual op-amp. Sadly, the headphone amplifier op-amp was sanded on top and its lettering was completely wiped clean. I can't tell exactly what op-amp is that, but it will provide only 110 mW per channel in 32 ohms. That is a low power output if you ask me. Bluetooth duties are handled by a mid-range Qualcomm chipset. It uses Bluetooth 5.0, but is limited only to AAC, CBC and aptX codecs. Sadly, there is no aptX HD and LDAC for you. Alright everybody, my body is ready for some music, so let's play some. Okay guys, so before I tell you exactly how it sounded via its RC output and also via its headphone output, I need to explain you why it sounded that way. So, generally speaking, that AK4493 DAC chipset that stays inside, as its technology suggests, it's a velvety sounding chipset with a lot of spotlights moving to the mid-range section, then followed by a powerful and robust bass delivery, and by a slight roll-off in the treble. So AKM chipsets aren't known to be champions when it comes to things like ultimate transparency or detail retrieval, or nor in the speed or slam departments. They are still one of the nicest Delta Sigma DACs when it comes to things like scale, like depth, like soundstage size, for example. Honestly, I'm yet to hear an AKM-based DAC that sounds tiny, small, claustrophobic. That never happened, actually. Of course, their voicing can be altered, so with different electronics, with different power supplies, output stages, crystal clocks, and so on. Their faults can also be taken care of course. Their tonality can be shifted, so you can make them much better in the treble delivery, and that is exactly what Gustard Audio team did with their A18 and A22 DACs. You can improve their bass delivery, for example, how SMSL SU9 did or Topping D90 did. On the other hand, you can balance their tonality, so it will not go to the bright side or to the warm side. It will be somewhere in the middle. And this is exactly what I feel about the Loxjie D30. The biggest shifter towards linearity and without killing a lot of musicality and smoothness is without a doubt that LM45-622 dual op-amp. Because I was rolling it in a lot of DACs, in a lot of headphone amps about a decade ago. This particular dual operational amplifier focuses mostly on linearity, on an extended frequency response, on detail retrieval, and on a wide soundstage. I do believe that it complements really well all AKM chipsets and of course the D30 as well. However, if you put that op-amp in the output stage of an ESS Sabre, simply prepare to clench your teeth because brightness will be quite a big issue. While listening to D30, I didn't find it wet sounding, I didn't find it bright sounding. I think it is somewhere in the middle, but slightly tilts towards the warm side, to the smooth side. So still there are quite a few technicalities that are left in this device. So I didn't find it lacking in details, for example. It never appeared as uninteresting or boring sounding. I believe it has a balanced tonality and seems to have a very good value. Preliminary impressions are good, but there is still a lot more to talk about, so let's break it down step by step. In terms of soundstage and depth, I do believe the main standout of the little D30 is actually how wide, how deep, how expanded can it sound, even compared to much pricier units. So the combination of that AKM chipset and of course of that wide sounding op-amp made the whole package really quite airy, quite extended sounding to a point of sounding slightly ethereal, losing some weight in the process. So with D30 I'm making simply 2 steps back, and while I see a much bigger in front of me, the final impact of the music is slightly diminished, so it seems simply less impactful and less fun in a way. While D30 is not that impressive in terms of transient response, impact and slam, I think it can stand easily shoulder to shoulder with the widest sounding single-ended DACs that I have experienced. So it definitely sounds slightly bigger compared to entry-level DACs like Topping D10S, Topping E30 and SMSL Sanskrit 10th Mark II, and it even approaches the performance of the SMSL M200, which costs quite a lot more, and it's very pleasing to experience all that at a lower price point. So while D30 is winning a lot of ground in terms of stage size, air around the notes and so on, it is losing a little bit of focus and contour of the notes. Like everything is slightly less controlled, less focused and clean sounding. As for transparency and detail retrieval, while D30 impressed me quite a lot with its soundstage and depth, I do believe it was not super sharp, not super defined sounding. So transparency is just okay. It's mid-5 by my standards. And yes, I've heard better, but not at this price, so not at $155. Transparency is not something that D30 is really proud about. It sounded pretty clean, I think, without any obvious flaws. But when I engaged better performing DACs, those were able to show me simply my music in a clearer way. With them, I've heard simply more details, more nuances in my music, more spatial cues, more of everything. However, D30 is not following the tonality of the topping E30, of the SMSL M200. It doesn't roll off as much in the treble, and it appears as slightly more extended in the treble, more complete in a way. So it has a wider frequency response than both devices, and as a direct result, it appears as slightly more detailed, more extended and more transparent. But again, it won't outperform mid-5 champions of today, like SMSL SU9 or Soundco's SGD1. Its wide bandwidth and ultra-low distortion op-amp will level its tonality to almost flat frequency response and will increase its transparency and detail retrieval, which sincerely is a good thing in an entry-level device like this. As for transient response, as a matter of fact, I find it pretty good in here. It will deliver some decent dynamics, but it wouldn't impress transient response not as myself. I still wanted some more raw energy out of this one. I wanted more brute force, more bass delivery, more treble sharpness, more speed, more slam. D30 doesn't have a very powerful output stage. There is still one single op-amp in there. It doesn't have huge capacitance, or doesn't have a lot of capacitors to store power for some wild dynamic swings. So again, it is decent in here, but far from speedy, far from impactful sounding. It worked nicer with smooth music like jazz. It worked really great with blues. It worked great with older music. And of course with classical pieces where soundstage is more important than an ultimate slam and impact. D30 was an easy rider most of the times, and if this is what I'm chasing for, it will deliver that in spades and will calm your spirits. Now, checking its headphone amp performance, from a decent headphone collection it was able to drive really good actually some desktop headphones, especially dynamic headphones like Kennerton Galarhorn, Kennerton Magni, RZH Mania, Fostex TH909. Also, all over-ear portable headphones were driven, of course, at their maximum, like Sennheiser Momentum line, like Mesia 99 line. It also drove pretty decent, actually, those huge planar magnetic headphones, RZH Phobos. In all fairness, RZH Phobos was the only planar magnetic headphone that worked decent enough on the little D30. But any other planar headphones of HiFiMan, of Odyssey, of Kennerton, was simply unsatisfactory on the little D30. So I was maxed out on the volume wheel and still I wanted simply more, and the biggest issue was it clipping and distorting past a certain point volume-wise. It slowly pressed the brakes with all my headphones. It is not exactly visceral and impactful sounding. It is slower paced and even a bit muddier in here, so when I've added an external headphone amplifier to the chain, things improved considerably and all those limitations were never found again. So its headphone amp section is only half decent with desktop headphones, and it will probably drive decent enough your dynamic headphones, but forget about driving planars because it can do that. As for frequency response, as long as you are using an external amplifier with it, be it a power amplifier or a headphone amplifier, I do believe that its bass delivery is actually pretty good sounding. So it went deep with my psytrance and drum and bass tracks. Surprisingly, I started feeling it in my stomach, in my belly. It was punchy, it was impactful, having a really nice extension even down to the lowest octaves. So it was able to provide an above decent performance extension in here, and while D30 is not lightning fast in its bass performance, I think that it has a really nice final kick, final blow that will always felt this raw and really powerful. For example, final bass notes on Angel by Massive Attack felt really heavy, really defined, so a huge blob of air mass was simply hitting my chest, and that felt really satisfying. Midrange is surely the best part of this device when it comes to frequency response, so it felt simply full-bodied and quite natural sounding most of the times. putting simply a huge accent of natural rendition of those musical notes. It delivered sweeter harmonics, you could call it as lusher sounding and smoother sounding compared to say topping D10S or topping D50S. Voices were absolutely phenomenal on this unit, and string instruments sounded also lifelike and quite impressive. Male voices were rendered just by a hair less imposing and compared to top-notch converters. For example, newer tracks of Leonard Cohen didn't feel guttural and heavy sounding. Some of that weight was forever lost on D30, but I'm okay with that considering its price point. Treble has a decent presence and a pretty good extension even in the top octave. However, it will not outperform entry-level ESS Sabre DACs of today. With all that said, the D30 simply felt slightly smoother sounding, so more relaxed in a way. Treble sharpness is simply not an issue on this DAC, so problem is that sometimes I want my music to be sharp and defined, and D30 can't really do that. I consider it rolled off by a very small margin, so to speak, in here, so it will not lure your attention to its treble region, but mostly to its mid-range and mid-bass sections. Overall, D30 has a good extension in the lower and upper registers, but still there was some raw energy missing at both ends of the spectrum, making it rounder and smoother sounding most of the time. As for the conclusions, if I'm looking at it as an all-in-one DAC, preamp, headphone amp combo, Bluetooth receiver, then I'm simply looking at a jack of all trades and master of none. But if I'm looking at it as a simple digital to analog converter only, with preamp and headphone amp duties handled to better performing devices, then I'm looking at a pretty good sounding unit with very little to nitpick. It seems to have all the right ingredients an entry to mid-level DAC should have. I find it very attractive and extremely easy to use with its simple graphical user interface. And if you love your music open wide, deep, smooth and relaxing, then I truly think D30 might be a good starting point. It will cost you only 159 bucks or euros, and I find it a really good value, especially if you care not only for the sound, but for looks and feature set as well. And this wraps my review for the Loxjie D30. I hope you enjoy it. My full in-depth review can be found on my website, there is a link below. In case you want to support this channel, please subscribe to it, and thank you for doing that. And as usual, listen to my music, be positive, and I'll see you next time. Cheers guys, bye bye.